webinar. The intention was to have this done in 15 minutes, so we can hopefully close at 9 o'clock before the working day begins for most people. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Basically a 15-minute webinar on the CEO's health and safety headache. One thing just to make you all aware of, you're all on mute, but if you want to ask a question, please type a question in the bottom right-hand side of your webinar interface, and we'll get the question. If we have time to answer the questions at the end, we will do so. If we don't have time to answer the questions today before 9 o'clock, we will get back to you directly with answers to your questions. So with no further ado, I'll just get straight into the webinar. So the context is the CEO's health and safety headache. So really the question is, to set the scene, what is a CEO, I suppose, thinking of from day to day? Who knows? But I suppose from a business perspective, typically it's all about the numbers. CEOs are very much focused on, it's a results-orientated game, so results focused on sales, margin, obviously costs, expenses, etc., and the bottom line, which is, I suppose, daily to the forefront of a CEO's mindset. Also within that, CEOs are very much you know, strategic decision makers, so there's constant decisions to be made, whether it's tactical or strategic decisions, which are consuming their thoughts on a daily basis. Many CEOs fundamentally are measured on shareholder value, so whether or not you're a publicly quoted company or not, it's the value that your business is delivering to your shareholders or your owners if you're a privately held company, which is very much a prime concern for CEOs and how they're fundamentally measured. And a major part of that is the brand, the reputation of the brand, and protecting the brand within the business as a fundamental driver of that shareholder value. However, like anybody else, all CEOs would have their 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, general sense of anxiety, and one thing that many CEOs will be anxious about is a significant negative health and safety event happening in their business with potentially serious casualties. Nobody wants to be involved in any of these types of serious incidents where there are potential fatalities involved. And yes, that will be a in the background for any CEO is to avoid this situation. So what is the health and safety context? I suppose the context and the landscape from a health and safety perspective is, you know, there's the regulatory pillar where, you know, you have your legal obligations under the law. Within the UK, there's the Health and Safety Act and the Health and Safety Regulations, and the HSE is the enforcing body where they can levy fines, which can be more punitive now because of the recent health and safety regulations that have come into play this year. And also outside of the legal obligations, you may have ISO accreditation, which is important to your business to win tenders, for example, and part of that, the health and safety processes can be a fundamental part of attaining that accreditation. Also morally and ethically, as a business, you've got a duty of care, you know, you've got a duty ethically to provide a safe workplace, which all fulfills or delivers upon the overall company reputation. Are you a good company to work for? This kind of rubber hits the road on a, you know, a numbers perspective in terms of productivity. Negative health and safety events can cause productivity losses through to lost time, perhaps poor worker morale, and also the administrative burden from fulfilling health and safety tasks. You know, paperwork, filling in spreadsheets can be very time consuming. And also then financially, in terms of the bottom line, negative health and safety events can be a burden, a financial burden in terms of payment of fines, the cost of claims in terms of payouts for claims that haven't been defended successfully, the legal costs, and obviously the cost of insurance and premiums. So that's the landscape that CEOs will be thinking of in a health and safety environment. And the picture is evolving all the time. As I mentioned, there's new regulations which have come into play this year, and 7 things that every CEO should know are really that the fines for health and safety offences are now bigger than ever before. I'm just going to quickly flick to the Sentencing Council in the UK, the guidelines, where there's based upon the turnover of the business and the potential culpability in terms of contributing to the event, you can see that the category range for fines are extremely large and are increasing. So they're no longer just a slap on the wrist for perhaps is how they were perceived in the past. You could be guilty even if no one is hurt. It's those fines and your guilt and your culpability is actually now based upon the potential for harm, not even actual harm, which is, again, you could be judged by what could have happened. So it's not only the potential for harm, but also the potential severity of that harm. So it is a potentially more severe incident, the fine could go up. If you do kill or injure someone, you are guilty until you can prove your innocence. Again, interestingly, the House of Lords judgment in 2008 made it clear that where usually an individual is innocent until proven guilty, but once an employee has been hurt, the onus is on the defending organisation, i.e. the business, the employer, to prove its innocence, either by showing that the accident was unforeseeable or there was no practical way of preventing it. So that is something that every CEO needs to show, is that the onus is on them to prove that they've fulfilled their duty of care. If you ignore warnings, the courts will be harsh. So there's evidence within the UK, Scottish Power, for example, they ignored some faulty valves within their business that were reported repeatedly before a severe incident happened. And the result, the punishments for that severe incident were very, very high as a result of repeatedly ignoring warnings. You could go to prison. So employees, self-employed and employers can all be subject to jail terms for health and safety offences, so they can actually go to prison if you are personally proved culpable within this context. And as I say, it's an evolving picture. So the Sentencing Council, who I've just gone to in their website, they've actually gone on a new consultation process earlier this year, in May of this year, to revise their sentencing guidelines, which could be reviewed next year. Within the US, it's a very, very similar picture, where there are negative events where the employer is seen to be culpable, that there are very, very high, this is a civil claim, paid for a civil claim brought by employees of an independent contractor. So it's a very, very similar picture within the US of the consequences for negative events. So really the picture for a CEO, and the question is, how can I protect my business? And how can I minimize this risk that we're talking about? And I suppose to understand the minimizing the risk, really we've got to consider, what do the health and safety executive with the UK, what are the reasons for a business being culpable in a health and safety event? And the health and safety, HSE in the UK do point out, they allocate responsibility, the factors contributing to responsibility, and the top within those is the failure of the board to take control. And then you can see rubber stamping of decisions, lack of resources, and poor communication. So this really speaks to a business paying lip service to health and safety, which is a significant position to be in, and a very, very poor reflection on the culture of health and safety within an organization that has these factors that contribute to an event. So really what you're looking at in terms of protecting my business and minimizing risk, it's not just hiring one person. It's not just doing a risk assessment. You're talking about root and branch change. You're talking about a fundamental change. And really what you're talking about is implementing a safety culture, not just about appointing a health and safety officer, but it's really about permeating a positive attitude to health and safety throughout the business. Health and safety is the responsibility of every single person within the organization, from the CEO through all line managers, senior managers, staff on the ground. Everybody has a responsibility to deliver a safe working environment, and really that is a safety culture is the answer to protecting your business. So at this point, it's prudent just to consider two recent cases within the UK in terms of delivering this safety culture. What do I need to do? What do I need to focus on? So within the UK, there's two examples that have been through the courts. And the first example was there was a dumper truck moving topsoil, tips onto its side on rough ground. Unfortunately, the driver falls out of the vehicle and is buried and dies from his injuries. In the second, also a tragic example where there's two traffic management services operators where they are moving a mobile tower under overhead power lines, and they're fatally electrocuted when the tower touches the power lines. So really the question here is, in a court scenario, which business is culpable and exposed to those negative consequences, and which business is not culpable. In the first instance, the dumper truck driver wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and this contributed to his death. And in the second instance, the operators moving the mobile tower didn't lower the tower before moving it. So their actions in both cases were seen to contribute to the incident. However, crucially, in the first instance, the dumper truck driver's employer could not present any evidence that the driver had received appropriate health and safety training. And in the second example, the employer was able to present evidence that the employees had been trained in the safe movement of the tower lights, and that the tower was marked with instructions to lower the tower when it was being moved. So the result of this was that in the first example, the direct employer of the contracting company and the director of the contracting company, between them, were seen to be guilty, seen to be culpable, and had to pay fines and costs of nearly £500,000. In the second instance, the traffic management services company was acquitted. They were able to present evidence that their employees had been trained, and that the Court of Appeal agreed that it wasn't reasonably foreseeable that the workers could choose to ignore their training and the warning signs, and therefore the company was acquitted. So really, what does this mean for CEOs in delivering on their health and safety culture? This means that basically there's two fundamental goals within a zero harm safety culture. There is implementing a true end-to-end process that involves everybody, that minimizes the risk of an incident, and where incidents do happen, minimize the potential severity of that incident. And then secondly, if an incident does occur, to prove that you have fulfilled your duty of care, to prove that you've done everything within your power to prevent an incident happening. So that's everything that we wanted to present this morning. Within Effective Software, we're all trained health and safety professionals, so our goal is assisting our customers deliver on their own safety culture and deliver on a promise that delivers a safe working environment. I'm just going to pause and go on mute at this point just to see if there are any questions. So we just actually have just noticed we've just gone over time, so it's just gone 9 o'clock. So with that, I'm just going to end the webinar, and there's one or two questions where I'm going to get back directly to the attendees on those. But hopefully you've enjoyed this webinar. Please get in touch with us if you'd like to get any more information from ourselves at effective-software.com. But otherwise, that's it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.